Hello, it's Keith here, and this is lesson 6 of the platform-specific series of my 8086 assembly tutorials, and 8186 as well, because we're going to be looking at the Wonderswan and MS-DOS today. We're going to be learning how to read in from joysticks and joypads and all of those nice kind of things on DOS and the Wonderswan. So let's go straight over and let's take a look. Now, we're going to start with the Wonderswan first, and we're going to learn how to read in the keys from it. Now, I've actually got a Wonderswan here. This is the Wonderswan Crystal. And you'll see the Wonderswan's a little bit odd because it's actually got two joypads. This bottom one is the X joypad here, and this top one is the Y joypad here. And it's got an A, a B button, and a start button here. There's a power and sound button, but we can't read those. Those are sort of hardware controlled. So we've got some buttons there, and we're going to see that represented within our reading. Now, on the Wonderswan, all we need to do is use port B5 here in hexadecimal. And the way we use this is we need to use 3 of the bits, 4, 5 and 6 as toggles to select one of the lines that we want to read from, one of the sets of controls, and then when we read from that port we will get those controls. So what we do is we send 4, 5 or 6 as a 1 bit when we write to that port B5 here, and then we read and we look at the bottom 4 bits and they will be the result of that line that we read in. So if we set bit 4 to 1, we will get up, right, down and left of the Y pad, that is the top pad there. And if we set bit 5 to 1, then we will get up, right, down and left of the X pad, that's the bottom one. And then if we set bit 6 to 1, then we get the start button, the A button and the B button, and bit 0 is unused there. And bit 7 being set to 1 doesn't do anything, so we probably shouldn't do that. Okay, so that's how we read in the Wonderswan keypad. You can see I've got some code here that's going to do that. So we're reading them in one at a time. We're masking the bits that we want to keep here, and there's an extra space there. So we are getting them and we're rotating them into position within the B register here, and then we're going to show that B register to the screen. So you can see we're loading each of them here, and if I just run the Wonderswan, this will work on the Wonderswan or the Wonderswan color, of course. So if I just press up, down, left and right here on the first pad, you can see those are being read in. And if I press B and A and start here, you can see those as well there. So those are the directions there for the first keypad. And if I use these here, these are the second keypad, and you can see those are being read into the high byte of BX there. So you can see this is just a nice simple example that will work for reading in the key directions, and that was the Wonderswan Classic, and here is the Wonderswan Color, and you can see it works exactly the same because from an input point of view the two are identical, I believe. So there we go. So that's how we can read in the joypads on the Wonderswan. Now let's move over to the MS-DOS systems. Now the MS-DOS system supported 2 joysticks, and these are analog joysticks, which mean rather than just being on and off, they actually can give a range. So the middle will be a kind of some value like 128, and left might be 0 and right might be 255, something like that, depending on the hardware. So we can read in from those, and each joystick will have 2 axes and also 2 fire buttons. That's how it used to work. Now, first of all, we're going to learn how to read from these joysticks using Interrupt 15, which is it's actually the cassette interrupt, strangely enough, but it does actually read by function 84. It reads in the joystick, and function 84 has 2 options. The first option will read in the fire buttons, and the second option will read in the directions, and actually they will read both joysticks at the same time. So let's go over to the source code. Let me dig out my joypad here. This is a it's not really an analog joystick because it only has a left and a right, but it responds as an analog joystick in Windows, and that's important because my other joypad here, this is a PlayStation joypad via a converter. This acts as buttons, not axes, so this isn't any good for testing this example code, but this one is, so that's quite important. So if I just fire up my code here, okay, so here's the example code here. Now, if I press the 2 fire buttons here, you can see that AX is changing here. The AL part is the 2 bits here are changing. And if I had a second joypad connected, they would also be represented there. Now, if we look at these second ones here, AX and BX, if I press up, you can see here BX has gone down to 1. If I press down, it's gone to FE. If I press left, it goes to 01, and if I press right, it goes to FE. And obviously, these are very extreme versions, and there's no in-between values on this pad because it is physically digital, even though it's using those analog axes. If I had a nice analog joystick, then you would see a range of movements there, and you would need to create some kind of dead zone, because you wouldn't want to respond to 81 as being a press to the right. You would want to wait until it got to maybe C0 or something. You need some kind of dead zone with an analog joystick. Now if I had a second pad, you would see those responding in CX and DX here. The directions there, you can see they're stuck at 0 because I've only got one pad, and also the bits are also represented in here. And we're going to have a look now at how we read those in. It's all done with that magic interrupt. Okay, so we've got some code here, and this is just positioning the cursor to the top of the screen just for the main loop, so that the code is showing the results in the same place each time. We're using AH set to 84 here, which is the read joystick option of interrupt 15, and DX selects the command, and DX0 will get the switches. We are then running interrupt 15 here, and we get the switches. We're effectively getting the 2 fire buttons of the first joystick in these bits here, bits 4 and 5, and the second joystick in bits 6 and 7. I have confirmed that. I have tested with my other joystick on my other machine. It's not plugged into this one, but yeah, they are both being read in there. And that's what we get with DX equals 0 when we run that, and then we're just showing the results to the screen. We then set DX to 1 and run option 84 of interrupt 15 again, and this gets the directions of those joysticks. So we are now loading in joystick 1's X and Y axis into AX and BX, and we're also loading joystick 2 into CX and DX here, and that's what we're doing there. So interrupt 15 option 84 makes it really easy for us to read in a joystick, and that is probably what we'd want to do if we want to read in a joystick nice and easily, but we probably want to give ourselves a hard time, because why not give ourselves some trouble? Let's learn how to read in directly from the hardware, because unlike with the keyboard, it's something we can reasonably do. It's all done, all the magic, with port 201. That's a 16-bit port. So we're loading the port number into DX, and when we read in from this, we will get a single byte back, and the format of that I thought was a bit fun. Let's have a look. So this 1 byte will return all of the information for both of the joysticks. That sounds a bit strange, being as they're analog joysticks. How do they do that? Well, we'll discuss that right now. So bits 0 and 1 represent the Y and X axis, and we'll explain how in a moment. That's for joystick 1. Bit 2 and 3 are the Y and X axis for joystick 2. Bit 4 and 5 are the fire buttons for joystick 1. And bit 6 and 7 are the fire buttons for joystick 2. So we have just 1 bit for each axis. So how on earth are we going to get an analog value which could go from 0 to 255 or something of that nature from just 1 bit? Well, what we have to do is pretty much we have to write a byte to this port with all the bits set to 1, so we write 255, and I'm told this actually charges some capacitors either in the joystick or the port. I'm not quite sure the technicalities of how this works, but apparently that's some kind of charging process. And then what we do is we read back from the bits that we're interested in. We're going to read in from joystick 1, so we test the X and Y bits here, and we're going to create some counters, and we're going to keep counting up until those return to 0, and at that point that counter will represent the X and Y axis. This is a fairly crude way of doing things the way I'm doing it. I don't think it's the best way, but it works well enough, and we are indeed getting a direction for each of these axes. So here is our code here. So first of all, we're reading in the fire buttons, and we don't need to do anything to do that, and we're just pushing that into AX here. And then we are strobing the port by sending 255 to that port. The port is in DX for the whole thing, 201H. And then we are just masking the 2 bits we are interested in. And we are then testing the X bit. And if the X bit is still 1, then we are increasing BX. And then we're testing the Y bit. And if the Y bit is still 1, we're increasing CY. And if none of the bits are 1, we're skipping down here. And then we are showing the result of that probing to the screen with our do monitor. And if I just run this, you will see here we now have the fire buttons once again. You can see those 2 are being read in there. There's our 2 fire buttons. And BX and CX are now approximately our axes. So if I press up here, you can see CX has gone to 05. If I press down, it's gone to 12B. If I press left, it's gone to 05. If I press right, it's gone to 12B. Now, these are very different to the range of results that I was getting back from the other routine. And you'll notice there's some slight fluctuations with regards to the counters here, because I think the way I'm doing it's probably a little bit crude and simplistic, but it worked well enough. And I personally enjoy going directly to the hardware and learning a little bit about how the hardware works rather than just letting those interrupts do all the clever work for us. So I thought that was quite fun. So you can go to my website, of course, and you can download all of these examples today. You can always get the examples, and I totally encourage you to have some fun with them and use them if you can in your own programs. Get the best use if you can, and if you can make them better, then please go ahead, because I'm in no way claiming to be an expert on all this. I just find this an interesting thing to do in my spare time, and hopefully you find some benefit from watching them. Now, one thing I do want to point out is you might have seen around the place some of these joypads that used to exist for the DOS machines that had 4 or even 6 buttons. I think I had a 6-button one. These were a trick. There was never an MS-DOS joypad with more than 2 buttons. How did these exist then? Well, what they tended to do is they tended to actually use both joystick ports simultaneously. So a 4-button joystick would actually be using the 2 fire buttons of joystick 1 and the 2 fire buttons of joystick 2. And a 6-button joystick would be using the fire buttons of both, and it would also be using the X and Y axis of joystick 2 to simulate a fire button. I think they would have the axes as in the center when neither button was pressed, and then one button would set the axis to high and the other button would set the other axis to high of joystick 2. So if you've seen those, you can read them, but there is no extension that I've ever heard of for the old machines to support joysticks with more than 2 fire buttons, literally 2 fire buttons per joystick, before the USB standard came in. So just bear that in mind. Anyway, if you've liked this video, please hit the like button below the video, because if you like the videos, YouTube recommends them to more people, and that helps me out. And if you want to see more of this kind of content, please subscribe, because there will be a guide to using the mouse later on coming from MS-DOS as well. And if you subscribe to the videos, it just encourages me to keep making them, because I have to spend a lot of time making them, so it would be a help. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this. Thanks for watching. If you've enjoyed this video today, please consider supporting my content. It takes 20 to 30 hours a week to keep making these videos. It's basically all I do when I'm not doing my day job, and it's only through the support of my patrons and the other sponsors that I'm able to continue justify doing it, essentially. You can back me on Patreon. I post a weekly update with the latest work on the current projects I'm doing. You can see one here, and also the newest videos. There's a large backlog of videos that are currently only available to the patrons, although they will all be available to everyone later on. And also it's the backers who I ask when it comes to making decisions on how to change the content in the future, what new content to create and things like that. You can see there was recently a survey of the backers, so I can plan next year's content. As well as Patreon, you can now become a member of my channel on YouTube. There's a join button you should see just below this video. You can use that. YouTube backers get the same content as Patreon. I just post it through the YouTube interface instead of the Patreon one. It's the same content every week. Also, if you prefer, you can go to my Teespring store and you can get some Chibi Akuma's merchandise or some Learn ASM merchandise if you prefer, if that's how you would like to back me. Links for all three are in the description of this video below. Anyway, whatever you decide to do, I hope you've really enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching today, and goodbye.